everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is part 2 of the activities that we're going to do with Amanda Bean's Amazing Dream. So if you have not yet watched part 1, where we actually go through and read the whole story, you will want to watch that video first so that you'll be better able to do and understand what we're doing for part 2. It's not absolutely necessary, but it will help clarify some thinking. So today I'm going to show you some activities that you can use the book with Amanda Bean's Amazing Dream. We're on this page where she is in the bakery, and we're going to focus our attention on this top tray of brownies. So we're looking at these brownies. So get that picture in your head because we're going to be talking about this picture a lot. So I want you to look at the top tray of the brownies and figure out how many brownies there are. And as you figure it out, I want you to write down how you thought about it. So how did you think about and come up with how many brownies there are? So when I do this activity with my students, these are some of the ways they think about the brownies. Some kids will say there are 2 rows of 7 brownies. So if you look at the picture, you might see 2 rows, and each row has 7 brownies in it. So maybe you thought of it that way too. If you thought of 2 rows of 7 brownies, give yourself a pat on the back. Some kids see columns. So they might say there's 7, and I changed my answer because some people will say 7 rows, but really those are columns. And we'll talk about the difference between using the word row and the word column in a little bit. So there's 7 columns of 2 brownies. So if you look at the picture, there's 7 columns. This one has the tray in front of it. 7 columns of 2 brownies. If that's how you thought about it, kiss your brain. Give your brain a kiss. Okay? Maybe you thought of it using addition. Maybe you looked at the picture of the brownies and you saw 7 plus 7. Give a thumbs up if you thought of 7 plus 7 as a way of looking at those brownies. You could also count by 2s. You could do 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 and think of your answer that way and go through and count by 2s. Some people might think that there's 2 groups of 7. And when we start thinking in multiplication, we're thinking of groups. So anytime you think of the words groups of, that's where our multiplication symbol comes in. There are 2 groups of 7. You could also say that there's 7 groups of 2. 7 groups of 2. And get your answer that way. So you can think of groups of using the words, or you can think of groups of using the multiplication symbol. Now, some people don't know their 7s, but they know their 5s and 2s. So some very clever people might think that there's 2 groups of 5, and that way they can multiply 2 times 5 because they know what 2 groups of 5 is very quickly. And there's 2 groups of 2. So then they would multiply 2 times 2 because they know their 2's very quickly. So let me show you what that would look like. So instead of thinking of a group of 7 and a group of 7 like this, where I have 7 dots, look where my dot marker had a blip. Whoops, we're not counting that dot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then another group of 7. Instead of thinking of 7 and 7, I can think of this as a group of 5 and 2 more. Because we know on our fingers, 5 and 2 makes 7. So 5 and 2 more is 7, and then another group of 5 and 2 more, that's a 7. And look, if I do 2 groups of 5, that reminds me of the 10 frame. So that would be 10. And then 2 groups of 2, that's easy to figure out, that would be 4. And so then all I have to do is add my group of 10 and my group of 4. So that's how this person thought of that. That was a very sophisticated way of breaking up those brownies and thinking about them. So that's one of the ways you could think about the brownies. Okay? For your second activity, what I would like for you to do is go around your house and find something that you could use to show these brownies. How could you build these brownies at your house? Now, I had gone to the store the other day and I found these really cool key tags, and I've been playing around with those. But you could use cereal, you could use candy, you could use goldfish crackers. There's all kinds of objects that you might have at your house that you could use to help count, and you're going to copy that array to make your 7 group of brownies. So you could make it with this. So I went around my house looking for ways that I could show these brownies, and I found Legos. So I did it with these Legos. I couldn't find a Lego that went all the way to 7, but this one has 6. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then I found this blue one to add one more. So that's 7, and then there's 6 and one more. That's 7. I also found a Lego that went to 8. So I did an 8 and an 8, and then I used another Lego piece, this little piece, to block one of them off. So I know I'm not going to count that one. And so that showed 2 groups of 7. So you could show this with Legos. If you want to do the strategy of 5s and 2s, you could use your Legos to do that. So there's my 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my 2 groups of 5. Here's my 2 groups of 4. So I can show when I put those together that that's going to make 14, because 10 and 4 together make 14. So you could do it with Legos like that. At our house, we have been doing some bead making and doing some stuff with melty beads. So I went and found some of my melty beads, and I could do 2 groups of 7 this way. And then somebody very clever pointed out that you could just do 14 straight in a row, 1 group of 14. So after you've built your picture of your brownies, then you're going to draw a picture so that it looks like this. If your picture is facing this direction, like my red ones, then your picture would look like this. You would have 2 rows of 7 brownies. Or you could say you have 7 columns of 2 brownies. So the way that I remember rows and brownies is when we go to the auditorium at school, we always sit in rows. So those look like rows. And columns are long because they hold up the building. You might have columns on your front porch, or you might see columns at your school or at a bank. Some big buildings have columns on their porch, and columns are long like the L. So I made my L a little bit extra long. So if you wanted to show this as one big column, you would turn that way, and this would show 7 rows of 2 brownies. Notice it was the same array, I just turned it. You can show 7 rows of 2 brownies, or that's 2 columns of 2 brownies. And you can see that they kind of look like columns because they're long and tall, like the letter L. So the word columns has that L in it, just like a column. So that's how I remember the difference between rows and columns. Now, if I wanted to do the yellow beads, I could draw a picture of the yellow beads and say I have 1 row of 14 brownies. Or I have 14 columns, little bitty tiny columns of 1 brownie. I ran out of room on my Post-it note. I had to start using shorthand. This picture shows, oh, I gotta turn it. If I turn it this way, I have 1 column of 14 brownies, or 14 rows, boop, 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 all my rows, with 1 brownie. So there were 4 different ways that I could show that number 14. I could show the number 14 as 7 times 2. I could show the number 14 as 2 times 7. And then I can show the number 14 as either one row of 14, one group of 14, or as 14 rows of 1, 14 groups of 1. So there were 4 different ways that I could show the number 14. And we did all of that just looking at the brownies. So if you look at this page, you could do the same activity using items around your house. They might be counters, they might be Legos, beads, cereal, goldfish, crackers, whatever you have around your house. You could actually bake cookies and talk about the arrays and the number of cookies that you bake. So you could do this with the rest of this page and recreate the picture and then talk about how many that would be. Okay? Now, if you go back and watch the video of part 1, there's lots of pictures in here that have arrays in them. There's things inside the bakery. There's windows in the buildings. There's all kinds of ways that you could count and figure out how many. So there's lots of math. So if you want to go back and rewatch part 1 and do some counting and see how many there are in each, everything in this book was drawn to a certain way on purpose to help you with your multiplication facts. I could do 2 groups of 3 and figure out how many that is. And once I know that that's 6, I could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 groups of 6. So there's all kinds of math in this book. So now that you've done part 2, you might want to go back and watch part 1 again. At home, you can come up with your own bakery problems. These are some examples. You can draw pictures and then write your equation just like we wrote our equations for the brownie problem. There were lots of ways you could write an equation for the brownie problem. You could do your own problems. So maybe you have 12 cookies. You could draw a picture of what would 12 cookies look like and what will that equation be. Or 18 cupcakes. Or 24 scones. Or 30 muffins. Or 36 loaves. And there's lots of ways that you can draw these pictures. So there's more than one way to show 12 cookies on a cookie pan. There's more than one way to have 18 cupcakes in an array. So that's why I have an S out here, because you might have one idea for how to draw 12 cookies, or you might have 2 or 3 or 4 ideas. So you might draw one picture or have lots of pictures, which means you would have one equation or lots of equations. So there's an S out here because all of these have more than one answer. If you do this activity, make sure you take a screenshot of it and send it to your teacher because they would love to see that you're working on this math at home. Have a great day and stay tuned for more videos.